Okay, next I want to talk about using Gulp.js. Gulp.js is a tool that you can use to help automate some basic tasks that you will carry out quite frequently while building websites. So let's say that I have a website here. We've got an HTML file, a CSS file, a JavaScript file, and then I'm bringing in a couple of other things: normalized CSS and moment.js for dealing with dates and times. And I've got all these files, but let's say I've got normalize and moment.js. Those have been brought in by another developer, so I've got the Bower was used as the tool to bring in those two libraries, moment and normalize. Inside of here we have the normalize.css file. So here's the basic file. It's got a lot of comments inside of it. I want to take that, I want to minimize it down, I want to get rid of all the comments. I want to save that in a standard folder with my other CSS. The moment.js file, I already have a minified version of that when I downloaded it with Bower, so I have the minified version, but I want to put that in the same folder as my other JavaScript. Now, you can manually do that. You can go and find a tool and minify the CSS and then copy it over into the other folder, but if you ever make changes to these files, you have to carry out that process again. And with your own CSS, with your own JavaScript. So I've got a very basic sample CSS file that I've got from my page here, and a very simple JavaScript file. But every time you save it and you want to test it, you have to, once again, minify it if you want, and copy it over into the folder so you've got them in the same place as the moment.js JavaScript file. Your main.css minified, copied over to the same place as you're keeping your other CSS file. And that way, in your HTML, you can point to the same location for both your CSS files, the same location for both your JavaScript files. So Gulp is going to help us by automating a lot of these tasks. So how do we use it? Well, at its most basic, Gulp really works with one single file called gulpfile.js. We're going to use npm node package manager to install Gulp and a couple of the Gulp plugins, Gulp minify and Gulp clean CSS. Gulp minify is good for minimizing your JavaScript and copying it from one location to another. Gulp clean CSS does the same sort of thing for CSS files, minifies them, copies them to a different location. To be able to use this, I have to install all three of these packages. So this is the start of my gulpfile.js. After I have these things installed, I'm going to be doing things like this. I'll say gulp.task, and I will have, in this example, I'm going to have three of these things in my file. Every one of these tasks is going to get a name. So I'll have one, I'm going to call it CSS, and then there will be a function. This one I'll call HTML. It will have a function inside of it. And this one I'll call JS, just to keep it simple. You can call these anything you want. Inside these functions will be Gulp code that I run. So I'm going to be running this minify command. I'm going to be running the clean CSS command inside of here and inside of here and inside of here. I'm just going to be copying my HTML file over to a different location. Now, a common practice with websites when you're building them is that you'll have your working space where you're editing files and moving things around and renaming things, and then the copy of the files that are actually going to go up to the web server, you'll have a different folder for that, and very often that folder is called the distribution folder, or dist for short, D-I-S-T. We're going to use Gulp to create that dist folder and all the content inside of it, made from all these other files that our project began with. So let's start by installing a few of these things. We have the Bower stuff installed, that was there already, but I want to install Gulp, Gulp minify, and Gulp clean CSS. So we'll jump over to the command line to do this. And now, I don't need package.json for this to work. With package.json, what that's going to allow me to do is it will allow me to save the references to these packages. So if I ever copy this file over to another location, I can simply run one command, the npm install command. It will read the package.json file and it knows, oh, okay, I've got to go get gulp, I've got to get gulp minify, gulp clean CSS. So let's set that up first of all. npm init is going to create our package.json file. Package name, this is just going to be the name of our project. My folder's called gulp, so I'll leave it with that. Yeah, we'll say it's version 1. My description, entry point, sure, that'll be my starting file. Test command, there's not going to be one. I don't have a git repo. Demo, sure, we'll say MIT. Is this fine? Yes, absolutely. Okay, now I have a package.json file. This is really, here's the couple of main lines right here, name and version. Those are the most important things. Then inside of here, there's a scripts section. So scripts object. By default, you get this one called test, which is just going to write out this command. This is actually going to run this. If I go into the command line right here, and I say npm run test, what it's going to do is it's going to come into the scripts object, look for the thing called test, and it's going to run that. So if I run it, there it is. It's writing out error, no test specified, and here's the error that it's generating. So this ampersand exit 1, that is actually generating an error with error number 1, just like that. Okay, we're going to, in a few minutes, we're going to come in here and we're going to create our own one called build, and this is going to run our gulp commands for us, but we don't have those yet, so leave this as is. Now I'm going to run those other commands. So these ones that I'm listing off in the HTML, and I'll leave a copy of this as a gist for you guys inside the notes so you can follow along with these commands. Just copy and paste them one at a time. Inside here, these are the 3 things we're going to install now. Gulp, gulp minify, gulp clean CSS. I'll clear my screen. npm install save dev. Now this is the reason why we created the package.json file, is to keep track of which version of these 3 tools that we have, or the fact that we have these tools installed. So if we copy our package.json file over to another folder, we can simply run npm install and it will go and get all of these packages all at once for us. So we need gulp. There it is. Oh yes, okay. So my naming my folder gulp means that inside here it's not happy because this is what I've called my project and I'm trying to install something with the same name. So let's call this gulp demo instead. Once again, we'll try. And we will install gulp inside of here, and this will add the, by saying save dev, right here, this save dev gulp, this is going to come in here, and there it is. Dev dependencies, gulp version 3.9.1 or higher. Let's do the other 2. We've got gulp, gulp minify, gulp clean CSS. And these just take a few seconds to install each. And gulp clean CSS. There we are. Okay, now we have these 3 things installed, so we can require them and use these variables. Gulp, that's the variable here that we're using. Gulp.task, we're using that. These are just the task names, the labels that we're giving to them. And the minify and clean CSS we're going to be using inside of here. Now let's do the HTML one first, because that's the simplest one. With gulp task HTML, what we want to do is copy our HTML file from the root folder location here into a folder called dist. Now we don't have the folder yet, but that's okay. We're going to create it here. So gulp.source, and then we're going to do .pipe. This is the basic structure for most of what you're going to do with Gulp. With gulp.source, you define what is the file or files that we're talking about. So this can be a string or an array of strings that define which files that you want to deal with. And pipe is you're sending the files that were found here to something else. In our case, I'm going to do gulp.dest. And this is the starting point. This is the ending point. So basically, we're going to take the index.html file, or I can say, hey, let's take all the HTML files, just in case there's more files, and I want to copy all of those to a folder called dist. That's all I have to put inside there. So starting at the root level, starting where the gulp file is, create a folder called dist, and that's where all of these files are going to be copied to. Pretty simple so far. So let's test it out. We can say gulp HTML. This is the command right here, HTML, that we're running. We do that. There we go. And over here you'll see that the folder dist was created, and all of my HTML files, the one file, was copied into this folder. Simple enough. Now, back to the package.json. Now I can create my build script. And it is going to be the exact same thing that I wrote on the command line. Gulp HTML. Now I can run this command. npm run build. And this does the exact same thing as gulp HTML because it is running that command. Now the cool thing about this is from the command line, when you run a command, gulp HTML, you can list them like this. So this would run all three tasks, the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. There we go. All three of them are done. So up here, same thing. I'm going to run all three of them. When I say npm run build, these are all going to get run. And this is another reason that we have the package.json. So you don't have to know necessarily what's in here. You can change this command, and it's always going to be npm run build that you're running, and it will run whatever you've defined as the build process for your project. All right, now let's do the CSS command. For this one, what we want to do is we want to come in here. We're going to go into the normalized CSS folder and find the normalized CSS file. I want to take that file, I want to strip it down, get rid of all these extra comments, compress it, and copy it into this dist folder to a CSS folder that we're going to create inside of there. So that's our next step. As always, we start with gulp source, and then that will be piped into something. In our case, this is going to be pumped into clean CSS, and we can specify options in here. If you go to the source page here for this, you'll find there's lots and lots of options. Things like debug, true. If you want to have the debugging information displayed to you. And we're going to pipe that over to our destination. And our destination is going to be dist/CSS. So create the CSS folder inside the dist folder. It doesn't exist yet. There's the dist folder. We're going to put the CSS folder inside that, and that will be where the result of this is going to be placed. So gulp source. What is the source file that we're talking about? Well, it's Bower components, normalized.css, normalized.css. Okay, so pointing to that file, we're going to clean it up, minify it, and copy it over into that location. So let's test this out. Gulp.css. Looks like it worked. Down here, sure enough, there's our CSS folder, and there's normalize. And if we take a look at that one, all the comments, except for this first one that has the exclamation mark, have been stripped out, and it's been compressed, which is exactly what we wanted. But we are still missing our other CSS file. We want to do the same things we did here with our CSS file, this main.css. I want to minify it and copy it over into this folder. So go back to here, and if you remember, I said that this source could be a string or an array of strings. So let's do that. Let's turn this into an array, and we'll say we also want to copy over from inside the CSS folder. We'll say everything that's got a CSS file extension. So this one and our main.css, all going to be copied over to that location. There we go, start, finish, no errors, and dist CSS main.css. There it is, and it's been minified. Excellent. So we're on to our last section, to the JavaScript. With JavaScript, we're going to be using the minify package. Now, we have a couple of things here. The moment.js folder, there's a moment folder. Inside that, there's a minified folder already. It's the minified moment.js. All I want to do is copy that over. I don't have to re-minify it. So this one I'm going to copy, and then my own JavaScript main.js, this one I'm going to minify and copy over. So let's do the straight copy first of all with moment.min.js. So define our source. It's going to be inside of our components. moment/min, and it is the moment.min.js file that I want. I'm going to simply pipe that into gulp.dest, and this is going to be the dist/js folder. So inside of dist, we're going to create a folder called js, and that's where this one is going to be copied to. So this is just copying that file. It's already minified. We don't have to do anything else. Now, our very own, so gulp.source, inside my JS folder, I'm going to say everything with a .js file extension. I want to pipe that, and I'm going to pipe it into the function called minify, which is coming out of here. So there is a function called minify. Once again, we can define options for it. In our case, the only option, if you want to see all the options, you can go to this URL right here. The only option that I want to use right now is the one called no source. The no source option, I'm setting to true. That will simply say that while you're minifying and copying stuff over, don't bring the original source file over. I don't want in my JS folder that I'm creating inside of the dist folder here, it's not here yet, but the one that I create, I don't want to take main.js and copy it over, as well as the minified version of main. I just want the minified version in the distribution folder. So our last step, pipe that into the gulp.dest, which is going to be our distribution folder /js, the exact same place as the moment.js. So this is just copy moment.min.js to dist/js, copy and minify main.js to dist/js. All right, jumping over here, we can test this out. GulpJS. There we go. And check our folder. Yep, they're both there. Look inside. That's definitely been minified. And the moment min.js was already minified. There it is. Okay, and now we have an entire distribution folder with the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, And if we had fonts, if we had images, we could copy those over as well. There's Gulp plugins for minifying images as well, so you can take a folder full of JPEG images or PNGs and minify them, shrink them down, compress them, and copy them over to the distribution folder. Lots of stuff you can do that will save you a ton of time. The more complex your site gets, you just have to edit your Gulp tasks to automate all of these things that you're having to do again and again while you're testing your site. And the package.json gives you the opportunity to list off all the Gulp commands that you want to do, as well as manage all the dependencies. So all these tools that you're using while you're developing, here they are. They're not being copied into the distribution folder. They're not going to be part of the finished version that's up on GitHub or up on the web server. We just use those locally while we're doing the development work. And so let's do one final test. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to delete my distribution folder. There it is. It's gone. I've got my Bower, I've got my CSS, I've got my JavaScript folder, I have my index.html, my Gulp file, but no distribution folder. So we're going to jump over here, clear the screen out, and do one final test. And that will be npm run build. And there we go. It has run the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript tasks. Jump in here, there's the CSS with our files, there's the HTML, and there's our two JavaScript files. And this file is linking to the normalize and the main right here, which are inside the same level, and these scripts are inside the dist folder as well, and those are the proper names that we have right here. Oh, actually, so there's a hyphen here for the minified one. Should be a hyphen. This one should be a hyphen. All right, there we are. And that's how you use Gulp. So any questions, please leave them in the comments. Please take a moment to review some of these packages, take a look at some of the online documentation for Gulp. And as always, thanks for watching.